Hi and a huge welcome to Steve's Kitchen. Now, basic bread making doesn't get any simpler than making a no-knead bread. And what do I mean by that? I mean, literally, we are not going to be kneading this bread. The principles behind this is it's a high hydration loaf. So we're using 75% water and we're letting a small amount of yeast do all the work for us. So come on, what are you waiting for? Again, you want a nice strong bread flour. We've got 400 grams, and that's about 14 ounces. Now we're going with a tiny amount of yeast, just 1/4 teaspoon is needed for this. I'm going to pop it to one side, and we're using 1.25 teaspoons of salt. Pop that to the opposite side of the yeast, and our 75% water. So we've got 300 milliliters of water straight in there. No need to do too much thinking, pardon the pun. Now you can get your hand in there, give that a mix through and get really mucky if you want to, or just take a fork and give this a bit of a stir through. Once the fork's done the first bit of the work, I'm just going to take my hands and just push the dough up against the side of the bowl to incorporate all the flour. So you can see our dough is really quite sticky and messy. Now just quickly clean your hands off, and that is all the work. We're not going to do any more kneading on this dough at all. What we are going to do is just seal that over with some plastic wrap, and we're going to leave this somewhere in the house. It doesn't have to be super warm, almost any ambient temperature will do. Leave it overnight or 12 hours, and then we're going to turn this into the most delicious loaf you've ever tried. Now, perhaps you left this overnight as I did, but 12 hours later, we've got this beautiful dough. And who have we got to thank for doing all that for us? Just 1/4 teaspoon of instant dried yeast. These little fellas worked all night proving and stretching out this dough for us. And so we've got this beautiful, bubbly and stretchy yeasty dough. Now on my countertop, I'm going to put down some whole grain flour, something with a little bit of texture in it. And I'm going to tease our dough out of the bowl, and it's more like a sponge at the moment. What I'm going to do is just fold this over, fold it into itself, fold it in again. I'll give it a little turn round, and I'm just getting my fingers underneath, gently teasing this, and I'm going to fold it over one more time. Again, that just encourages stretching out the glutens a little bit. And then over here, I've got myself a little bit of cotton cloth. Just sprinkle some whole grain flour over it to stop it from sticking. Then we're going to get our loaf or our dough here, just tease it up, lift it into your hands like that. And what I want you to do is pop it with the seam side down onto the cotton like that. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more flour over the top, and then I'm just going to cover that over. Doesn't have to be tightly sealed. Now we want our loaf to prove a little bit. I would leave it for a couple of hours depending on the temperature of your house, and then we're going to bake it. And now it's time for the fun to begin, because we're going to bake the bread. Now at this point, I've got my oven preheating to 220 degrees Celsius. That's about 430 Fahrenheit, so that's pretty hot. But we're going to be baking this in a pot. Now you can use a clay pot, a Dutch oven. I'm using a Pyrex dish for this because I want the clear bowl so I can film it while it's baking. But you're going to preheat that inside the oven as well, so it's going to be super hot. And you are going to need a lid on this pot so that we can keep the steam and moisture in there. So my oven's up to temperature. My pot's up to temperature. I'm going to carefully get it out of the oven. Make sure you don't put it on a cold surface, otherwise you'll crack your pot. Super careful. I'm going to pop that down on some cork. I'm going to take my lid off. Now this is super hot. I like to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the inside. Come over here, you can see the bread dough has risen a little bit now. It's nice and puffy. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip this over onto my hand. So now I've got the sealed side, this side down, and I'm going to drop this into my pot. Just drop it in the center, pop my lid on, and quickly we want to get this in the oven. Now I want to bake that for 30 minutes with the lid on to trap the steam in. Then we're going to take the lid off, and the last 15 minutes just to get a beautiful crust. Now we're just bringing the loaf out of the oven. You can see there it's developed a beautiful crust because we took the top off for the last 15 minutes. Normally we want the bread to cool down for an hour, maybe even 2 hours, so that when you cut it, all the steam doesn't come out and dry the bread out. But we're just going to let ours cool down a little bit, and then I'll let you have a look. Now I'm cheating a little bit here, look. The bread is still pretty hot, so the whole house smells like heaven. I'm going to cut this open despite it being a little bit too warm and just show you inside. Now just listen to this crust as I go through it. We're going to release all the steam out of there. Look at that crumb. these lovely air pockets. Now I tell you, if you're making this at home, let it cool down, but I get to give this a try. Just look, I break a piece off. The crust is delicious. And I think if you're new to bread making, you make this for your family and friends, they're going to be so impressed with what you've made. Anyway, let's give this a try. Got all the texture and elasticity of a really good kneaded dough. And it's a little bit like a sourdough without the sourdough flavor. If you decide to make this at home, I'd love you to send me some pictures across on Steve's Kitchen. Please share the love if you've enjoyed the video. And if you're enjoying the series of an introduction to bread making, I'd love to hear what you have to think about it down below. Be good, and I will see you very shortly in the next video. Take care.